The Devil in the Belfry. Everybody knows, in a general way, that the finest place in the world is, or, alas, was, the Dutch borough of Vondervotteimittis. Yet, as it lies some distance from any of the main roads, being in a somewhat out-of-the-way situation, there are, perhaps, very few of my readers who have ever paid it a visit, for the benefit of those who have not. Therefore, it will be only proper that I should enter into some account of it, and this is, indeed, the more evident as, with the hope of enlisting public sympathy in behalf of the inhabitants, I design here to give a history in petto of the calamitous events which have so lately occurred within the limits. No one who knows me will doubt that the duty thus self-imposed will be executed to the best of my ability, with all that rigid impartiality, all that cautious examination into facts, and diligent collation of authorities which should ever distinguish him who aspires to the title of historian. Thus begins the quirky little short story known as The Devil in the Belfry by Edgar Allan Poe. So this video will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one obviously being the short story discussion playlist, but number two being the Edgar Allan Poe playlist, as we are finding this at the very tail end of October 2023. This video will have three separate sections. Number one, so what happened, then we will get to the lit crit portion of the video, and finally, the writer's corner portion of the video. So, what happened in this short story? The town of Vondervotteimittis is a lonely little place, even if they are a bit... The town of Vondervotteimittis is a lonely little place, even if they are a little bit elitist, or maybe more than a little bit elitist, and everyone there is set in their strange little ways. It may be an odd little town, but their culture is big, and it means a lot to them. It means a lot of cabbage, it means a lot of odd-colored clothing, and it means a whole lot of timeliness. The town's pride and joy is a multi-faced clock tower that keeps everyone humming along as scheduled, until one day when a strange little man waltzes into town, slightly offbeat, and attacks the clock tower guy. But he doesn't stop there. That's not what he does. He carries on by ringing the clock to 13 o'clock, throwing everyone off of base. So, when we talk about lit crit, what are we talking about here? What do we mean when we talk about this story? Well, part of the answer is in the name of the town itself. If we find that town, Vondervotteimittis, it is, right? Wonder what time it is. Now, except, who cares? Vondervotteimittis it is. This is a place that is stuck on schedule. Stuck on schedule, if you will. Now, what does that mean, and why is it here in the story? A lot of the criticism that you will see about this story is twofold, one of which we will get to in the writer's corner portion of the video, but here, a lot of the criticism of this short story circles around chaos versus order. And, okay, but that's kind of on the nose, isn't it? Chaos versus order doesn't really mean a whole lot when there is no specific, how should I say this? There is no real emphasis put on either of these sides being correct, either the town or the strange little devil that waltzes in. There is no judgment placed on that. And again, this is going to come back in the writer's corner portion of the video. With there being no definitive judgments passed by the author, the idea of chaos versus order doesn't really give us a whole lot in this short story because, okay, what do we mean by that? Chaos versus order, yeah, we face that every day in our day-to-day life. So I want to take this a little bit of a different direction. I want to introduce the idea of addiction here. We have an author who knows a little bit about being addicted to things, don't we, in Edgar Allan Poe. Now, why would I make this about addiction? How does that make sense? Well, the world in general, the world writ large, runs very much like Wonder of a Time It Is. The world in general runs very on schedule, on pace, on par. The world in general has all of these expectations and guidelines written out for you. The world in general has all of these small things that you were supposed to just kind of know. If you're here, you're supposed to eat cabbage and ham, don't you know? You're supposed to wear green stockings, don't you know? You're supposed to be so super on time that the fact that the centerpiece of the entire town is a multi-faced clock tower just sort of makes sense to you. And the devil that comes in would represent addiction itself. Addiction does not care. The little devil that waltzes in, though he may be offbeat, he's dancing a jig no matter what. He is dancing all around. He is having a good time. Very often, our addictions start off as a good time. Now, he waltzes into town and beats up the town's Quasimodo. He waltzes into town and takes out the clock tower guy. Doesn't that sort of sound the way that addiction knocks you on your butt? You weren't supposed to drink that much, and now you've woken up late for work. You weren't supposed to smoke that many, and now you have no idea what time it is. You weren't supposed to eat all of that ham, and now you're not going anywhere. This idea of addiction throwing off the adult world, throwing off the world that we have come to adopt as our own, society in general, culture in general, all of these things. Addiction does that, and it does not let us go. At the end of this story, addiction rings the clock tower 13 times and throws everyone off in the process. Much in the same way that an addiction will throw off your entire social circle and not let anyone sort of recover or know what is going on, right? Everyone has lost time because you are a drain on them as an addict. But number two, what if this little devil represents creativity? Waltzing into town like that is taking a different path than the humdrum day-to-day, which is represented by the rest of Wonder of a Time It Is. Not caring about the time is kind of like creativity, coming to us from an author, Edgar Allan Poe, who writes many times about the witching hour, right? The late, late night as opposed to, all of these cut and prim short stories of the time that would have taken place at noon. Creativity, then, waltzing into town the way that it does, ends up inventing 13 o'clock. Takes all of the assumptions of this town. This town is comprised of people who fully assume that there is 1 o'clock through 12 o'clock, and then you get to the other 1 o'clock through 12 o'clock. But creativity comes in, waltzes in style, and goes ahead and rings that clock 13 times, creates a whole different hour. And creativity refuses to do what you tell it to do, just like this little devil waltzed into town at the beat of his own drum, did what he wanted to do, and created something new. That sounds like a metaphor for creativity to me. So those are the two real lit crit ideas that I have to talk about with this short story. I have only one note for the Writer's Corner. So let's go to the Writer's Corner portion of this video. Contemporaries thought that this short story, I almost said poem, thought that this short story was a criticism of Martin Van Buren, who was the president of the United States at the time. All these people sound like people from where Martin Van Buren sounds, and etc. And, make of it what you will. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. The point is, it was other people who had to point that out. We live in a time, so if this were just meant to be about Martin Van Buren and very on the nose, and maybe even Martin Van Buren's name appeared in the piece, well, that's not literature at that point, that's propaganda. The difference between propaganda and literature is propaganda is written by the writer with an intent to get the reader someplace. Literature, art, is written in order that the reader creates their own meaning from the piece. We live in a time where we are having art shoved in our face that says one thing or another, and it makes sure we know that this art is about one thing or another. Well, that's not art, that's propaganda. Not all art is propaganda, and no propaganda is art. It may be artistic, it might look nice, it might read well, but that's not what art is. That's all I have for this short story. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do on the channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more, because I have there's poetry on the channel every Monday. There are multiple read-alongs going on at any given time. And hey, I hope to have you back for the next one.